Well, on behalf of Sony and Adorama, I'd like to officially welcome you all to this Be Alpha event and to thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. We have a brilliant lineup of shooting experiences for you guys today, as well as a brilliant lineup of speakers. And seeing as though I know none of you came here to hear me speak, I'll keep it pretty brief. But it is my pleasure to introduce Brooke Shaden, Sony Artisan of Imagery, and for those of you who don't know Brooke is a fine art photographer and self-portrait artist who's going to be speaking to us today about how to create compelling, meaningful imagery no matter the circumstance. So once again, welcome, and welcome, Brooke.
Thank you. Aww. Hi, guys. So we're going to talk about a few things today, mostly about creating art, and specifically creating really weird art, and specifically creating really weird art for yourself, and doing that without any compromise. And what does that mean? What does that look like? And how can we create art that's engaging, that actually says something about who you are and that connects to other people? So we don't have a ton of time to talk about this, and I have a lot to say, so let's dive right in. And I want you to know I am such an open book, so if afterwards you want to just come up and have a chat, find a quiet stairwell to sit in, that is my specialty. So we can do that afterwards if you want. I have this kind of interesting word up here, confrontation. And it's an interesting word because we don't often think about confrontation in art. But I believe that at the center, at the heart of what art is confrontation with yourself, and then confrontation with the world once you've actually confronted yourself. So I want to talk about confrontation, and I want to show you a few different times where I confronted myself in my art. I'm a self-portrait artist, which means that most of the time I am taking pictures of myself. I just want to get a show of hands of who does self-portraits. Okay, that's a sad few amount of people in the room. Who has ever attempted a self-portrait? A few more. Who is definitely going to do a self-portrait after this? I'll get you all, don't worry, it'll be fine. So I do stuff like this. This is chocolate sauce. This was one of the more preferred methods of covering myself in a substance that my husband was a fan of, as opposed to some others, which you'll see in a second here. I do weird stuff for art. This is what I do. I cover myself in molasses and chocolate syrup. I stick my head in milky jars of water. I end up in brambles and ice cold water. And this is what I do on a regular basis to challenge myself and confront myself, because I believe that that is at the center of art. This is an example of the molasses. It didn't go quite as smoothly as the chocolate syrup, as you can imagine. One is tastier than the other. I don't know if you've ever tried to eat molasses. It's very disgusting. And sticky. I had to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to do this so that nobody in my house would find out, but then I left sticky footprints all the way to the bathroom. Does that happen to you too? No? Okay. Well, it happens to me. I started doing really weird stuff for my art. I started to sort of ask myself, what can I do with my art that's different than other people? And I started to realize if I'm going to be a self-portrait artist, then I need to figure out why I am in front of the camera and not somebody else. And I don't know if it's obvious, but I'm quite a tiny person. And I started to put myself in tiny spaces, like this dryer and this freezer. Try to fit yourself in a freezer. It is so difficult, especially because it's really high up off the ground. It's a whole acrobatic routine. And then I did this, which was, to date, my scariest photo shoot that I have ever done. And there will be a reason why I'm telling you about this, but quick story. I don't know if you've ever had to try to conceptualize how you're going to put your head in a jar of water. Just think about it for a second. Like, what would you have to go through to do this? And I realized that I had to do a back bend over my sofa and then submerge my head in the jar that way. So that's what I did. But have you ever submerged your head upside down in water before? Because water just goes right up your nose and you can't help it at all. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. Maybe there is, but there wasn't anything I could do. So I put my head in this milky jar of water. I did 2 takes, and I decided if I got nothing, I don't care, and this is it. And to date, this was my scariest photo shoot because my head barely fit in that jar. I have quite a pronounced nose. I don't know if you can see it. And it's very difficult to get your head in a jar if you have a big nose. So this was very challenging to do. But this was just one way that I made a choice out of bravery, that I did something that I did not want to do for my art. And that's what we're talking about today, is what if you made every single choice for your photography career out of bravery? What would that look like? And I want to really get into the depths of that in just a second. This was a photo shoot in Iceland. Who's been to Iceland? Not many. I'm surprised. Okay, well, if you haven't been, you should go. And you should go to this place. It's a place that I can't pronounce. It's something like Jokelglarsen. Say it again. Oh, come on. I can't. You have to tell everyone later, okay? I can't say that. But it's a glacier lagoon. And it's very, very cold. And I got there at midnight to do this photo shoot because the sun just never goes down in the summer. And I decided to wade into this pool of water. Naturally, it was cold because there were glaciers. And I thought, well, it won't be that bad, right? No, it was terrible. It was really terrible. And I put on these waders, like for fishing, underneath my dress and went out into the water. And of course, they started leaking immediately, so I had water in my waders, and that's not what anybody wants in a glacier lagoon at midnight. But funny story about this, I did this photo shoot. It was terrifying. Somebody had seen a whale pass through here just 2 weeks earlier, which, why? It's so scary. So I went in, I did this photo shoot, and then last week somebody emailed me and they were like, hey, I've been trying to find you for like 4 years. I think this is you in my picture. And there was another photographer, like me, I don't know, 100 yards down, taking pictures of me at midnight in that glacier lagoon. That's just a side story. But I started to realize that some of the decisions that I was making, unlike that one in the glacier lagoon, were not born out of bravery. That I was doing things that were perhaps a little bit like tricks, a little bit like really easy to rely on gimmicks that I could do that people would engage with easily. And you might not want to admit this in a public crowd, but I'm really curious, who has ever created something knowing that it would be popular online? Yes, lots of liars in the crowd. That's okay. We'll work on that as we go. So I started to do certain things that I really did like, but that became sort of fallbacks. I was doing things like self-portraits and really turned that into my thing. I was doing things like fitting myself into small spaces, as you saw, and that became my thing. And I started to realize that they were just things that I was doing, and it wasn't really me. So how do I get to the bottom of it? And I realized that these actionable items were defining me, but that's not the depth of who I am. So how do I create art that means something, that really means something, and still produce work that people want to see? And that became really a struggle for me over the years. I started to realize that style is a trap, that if I define my style too closely, then I feel like I have to produce that style over and over again. Now, I know that that's something that we can all relate to in our careers, in our photo journeys. You start making something, it becomes popular, so you feel like you should keep doing that thing to make people happy. Just please tell me you've at least had that experience. And it's a natural experience. It comes with doing something good, popular, successful, whatever you want to call it, but it becomes a trap. And I got really scared of this style trap that I had seen so many times. And I started to realize that those were boxes that I was willingly putting myself in. I would see people on a train or on an airplane and introduce myself and say, hi, I'm a fine art photographer. Hi, I'm a conceptual artist. I'm a self-portrait artist. And I started to introduce myself in these ways that made me feel like I had to be that thing, that one thing. And I got really afraid of making that my thing. And I started to think, what if I got rid of that box, but then I really remained true to who I was? What would that look like? And these were the questions that I answered very deeply and very sincerely for myself. These are the questions that really meant something at the end of the day. What do you believe in? How do you want to make people feel? And what do you want your legacy to be? Do you feel like you could answer those questions right now? Like if I give you 1 minute, you could just hammer that out? Because I think too often we don't bother to answer these questions sincerely with a lot of heart and depth. And that's what I want to focus on today, is how do we answer these questions visually through the art that we create? It doesn't matter to me if you're not a fine art photographer, whatever that means. What matters to me is that you're creating and you know why you're creating. This is what I believe. I believe that art is painfully deep and that we are way too shallow most of the time. That we are not deep enough for the art that demands us to be. And I want to change that. I want to challenge us to create something more meaningful for our art than what we do on a regular basis. These are some examples of images that I created that I felt did go to those depths in some way. And you might look at these and think, this is stupid. This doesn't mean anything. I don't get this at all. Why would you do this? Trust me, I've heard all of it. And I'm totally okay with you saying that. So if you see something and you don't connect, that's okay. This isn't about connecting it to you. It's about connecting it to me and then finding that small tribe of people who connect to that as well. So this was one image that I created. I built a room inside of a room. Have you ever gone into Home Depot and said, I need to build a room, can you help me? People look at you like you're crazy. See, you know what? 3 people have done this, and that's what I love about finding your people. So I went into Home Depot and I said, how do you build a room inside of a room? And slowly but surely, after they stopped, 1, ignoring me, and then 2, making fun of me, they started helping me. And I got some walls up, and I got crown molding, and I had all this paint, and I made this room. And then I mounted my camera to a ceiling on a video slider. You know those things where you put your video camera down and then you slide it? What's that? I don't know what. It's just a slider? Great. I knew that. So I put it on a slider. I mounted that to the ceiling. And then for every image, I would click my camera, slide it out to the center, and then it would shoot looking down into the room. And that's how I created this image. This is an image that lots of people are offended by. Great. Why not? Huh? So I love this image because I was afraid to do it, because I was afraid to put it out there. I love this image for what it stands for. And I want to know, I want to get a poll of the room right now. How many of you guys think that these hands are holding her together? Okay. How many think that they're pulling her apart? Negative people in the room. That's okay. I like it. I meant both by it. There is no right answer, of course. But it's kind of a polarizing image for that reason. This is an image that's really meaningful to me because it's meaningful to other people. Do you ever have that experience where you make something and it means so much to somebody else that you start to see more value in it? I've had that experience just a couple of times, and this is one of those images where people started reaching out and saying, I needed to see this image. This changed something in me. This really helped me. And so what I started to do was to give this image away as gifts to people who I felt could really use it, who really needed it. And that's what I mean when I say that we're too shallow for the art that demands more from us, is that are we really connecting to those people who need us, who need the gift that we put into the world? Are we even connecting to ourselves and what we need from ourselves in the world? And this image taught me to do that. And then this one again, because it was really quite traumatic and painful. And this is one of the only images that I have ever created that I made for myself, out of an emotion that I was feeling on a particular day. I never create like that. I create very detached from my own work. I often will go into a photo shoot and make up a story and become a character and not really create from my own personal history. But this time I did, and that led me into a whole new exploration. This is actually one of the newest images that I created last week in my bathroom. And this is a very personal image for me because this is the second image in a series that I have been working on for almost 2 years now. that I just can't get right, because this series demands me to be deeper than I am right now. Isn't that an interesting thing, to know that the art that wants to come out of you isn't ready for you yet? I love realizing that I am not ready to create the art that I need to make. So how do we get ready for something like that? And it's about recognizing ourselves. It's about realizing that there is work to do and that we don't actually know who we are most of the time. Do you feel like you know who you are entirely right now? Okay. 80%? That's not bad. That's actually really good, I would say. Yes. You know, it's difficult to recognize yourself because we think we know who we are, but we really don't. And it's very difficult to try to figure out who that person is. And I think of it as sort of re-recognition. Being willing to know who you are and then take a step back and say, never mind, that's not actually who I am right now. But I believe that if you ask that question and you put who you are into what you do, then the way that you express that is irrelevant. So I just want to get another show of hands. Who is a fine art photographer? So that means the rest of you would not consider yourselves to be art photographers. And that's okay. And I actually don't know what I am either anymore. I've sort of come to this crossroads where I'm kind of sick of calling myself a photographer. You're probably not. You're probably really into the photo thing, and I am not so into the photo thing. I love that I get to use a camera for what I do, but it's not who I am. And that's really the danger here, is that thinking who we are is encompassed in this machine that takes pictures for us. So I started to explore and ask myself, who am I outside of photography? And I started to realize that there shouldn't be any fear in asking myself that question. Who here thinks that your career would probably dive if you stopped doing photography? Everyone thinks that your career would be totally fine if you stopped doing photography? Okay, I see. Who in here isn't a full-time photographer? Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Okay, so embody a full-time photographer right now and ask yourself, if you made your living taking pictures and then you stopped, would your clientele stop going with you? Probably. I did this poll online and I asked my following, what do you care about more, my pictures or my ideas? And 42% said that they follow me almost exclusively for my ideas and not for my images. And that was a really interesting thing to note, that 42% of people were willing to stick with me no matter what I ended up sharing. So that's when this idea popped into my head, that technique can get old, but vision is always new. And if you are at the top of your game, every single best photographer, best artist I know, who is just killing it in their game, all of those people put vision above technique. They know what they want to say before they know how they want to say it. And I think that is so important. So I'm writing a novel. Some of you probably don't know that. Nor would you care, because you don't care about young adult fantasy books, most likely. But I do, so I'm writing a novel. I decided to pick up sculpture earlier this year, and why not? I can do that, I can write a novel, I can do photography, who says? So I started to create these super creepy sculptures. I live in a very tiny town that is also a retirement community, so I was taking this ceramics class with a whole bunch of retired women. And I started, and they kept saying, "Oh, Brooke, you're so cute. We're so glad that you're in this class." And I was like, sure. And then I started making this, and then they were like, "Oh, I see." You know, like how people do, like when they're trying to be nice, but they really just don't know what to say to you. So I got through this, and it was kind of funny. At the very end of my class, this woman who I sat next to the whole time, she goes, I think I'm gonna make a skull. And I was like, yes, if I do nothing else in my career, at least I encouraged this 80-year-old woman to make a skull. Isn't that wonderful? But that's how it started out, and it wasn't very easy at the beginning. And I found that I had a lot of fear wrapped up in this idea of breaking out of what I always do, of breaking out of being a fine art photographer. And I had to ask myself, could I be something more than that? Is there anything more than that inside of me? And these sculptures helped me say yes. I recently had my gallery here in New York City reach out to me. And she said, I would like you to create a new series, and this series will be debuted in my gallery in Chelsea in the summer of 2019. And I said, oh my God, that's amazing. I would love a solo show in New York City, right? Because anybody would. And then she said, but I'd really like you to have the vibe of bubblegum and cotton candy. You guys have seen my work now, right? So you know that that's not jiving with me. And she said, I want to see happy Brooke. Like, if you could just do happy works, what would that look like? Wouldn't that be interesting? And I paused for a very long time, and then I said, no, that would not be interesting at all. And then I said, okay, I'll think about it, and I hung up, and I had this internal struggle of, well, do I give up a solo show in New York City, or do I create bubblegum and cotton candy? So this was what I wrote to her. I said, after a week, and she was badgering me for an answer, I said, I hate telling you no, but the idea isn't in alignment with my vision. I know you'll make a great, happy summer show with someone else. Thank you for always thinking of me and believing in me. At this point, I thought she was going to ditch me. You know, when you ask an artist to do something completely opposite of what they do, probably they don't want to carry your work anymore in their gallery. That's what I thought. So I tried to add in that last line of thanks for thinking of me and believing in me and some hearts, because that's what you do when you're trying to get someone on the good side. And then she wrote back and she said, calling you. And then she called me, and 30 seconds later she said, I'm giving you the summer show and you can do whatever you want. I don't care what it looks like. And this is a lesson. This is a lesson in knowing who you are to the core and not compromising on who that person is, because that manifests in your art and in your vision. So I started to create. And I'm working on this series right now all about death and grief. And I've been working on this series for the last year and 8 months, roughly. And it's been a really tough journey. I have not been connecting very easily to it. I haven't created anything that felt totally me. And I realized that the problem was that I was creating what I thought I should make at this stage in my career. I've been an artist for 10 years. And I thought that maybe since I've been an artist for 10 years, I should have super expensive locations and really ornate props and really interesting sets. And I started to create images that I just didn't care about. I was investing thousands of dollars into these images, and they meant so little to me. So I decided to start over. After a year and a half and a lot of thousands of dollars invested, I took a step back. I didn't do anything with those images, and I started over in my garage with a tarp on the floor and a bed sheet hung up in the backdrop. And I created these images with my friend, who is very kind to get up at the crack of dawn and do this. And this was the image that I made. And it's a really weird, grotesque image. And I know that the majority of people here will not like this image. But I love this image. This image is more me than anything I have ever made before. So it's a success. What I want to encourage you to do is to ask yourself, do I recognize who I am, truly? And answer that question, and then create from that space. Thank you.